there's food for the body, then there must be food for the soul. And Pastor Dog is going to teach us just how to do that. Pastor Dog, most people are so focused on themselves physically that they forget that we have to feed the inside.
Right.
As in really the inside, the core of our very spirit. How do we do that?
Well, Jesus said man doesn't live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. And if we have every earthly benefit satisfied, but we're not feeding our souls with what is the purpose of life? I mean, everyone knows we're here temporarily. And so we need to ask ourselves, you know, what is the priority? And Jesus said, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all the other things are secondary. They'll come to you. And so that's why I think it's so important that we study the teachings of Jesus. And that has a transforming influence on our lives.
How it all started.
Tell us your story. Share this with us, please.
My father, he was a pilot, and he was very successful in the aviation industry. And at one time, he owned 2 airlines. He was very wealthy. My mother was in show business, and she used to write songs for Elvis Presley, and she was the president of the film critics in Los Angeles. And we knew a lot of the movie stars.
So you were born to 2 very driven parents.
That's right. You're very perceptive. And they're so driven, they often don't have time for the children. So I got into a lot of trouble growing up. My father was so focused on money and the business. My mother, her career, they separated. And I went back and forth between Los Angeles and New York City, where my mother worked. And I just started to say, what's the purpose of life? If you're born and you live a little while, and then you die and you just turn back into fertilizer,
True.
then, you know, that's not a great purpose for a living.
The troubled dog Batchelor.
And so I began to think about suicide. I got into a lot of trouble. I was just trying to figure out, is there any meaning to life?
Finding the cave and the Bible.
And then I thought, instead of just committing suicide, have as much adventure as you can, and then you'll die having fun. So I ran away from home. I started hitchhiking around the country. And when I was 15, 16 years old, I found a cave in the mountains above Palm Springs. I wanted to find God in nature. Maybe there's...
At that time, you were already looking for God. But you were at the point of desperation and hopelessness.
Well, the miracle I didn't mention is when I was living in the cave, someone had camped in this cave before, and they left a Bible in the cave.
Okay, that was meant to be.
I believe so now.
The final turning point. How Pastor Dog became a pastor.
Now this is the final turning point. How Pastor Dog became Pastor Dog. Okay, how did it happen?
Well, gradually, I began to get impressed that I wanted to tell everybody what had happened in my life and how the Lord had transformed me. And one miracle in particular took place while I was still living up in the mountains. After accepting the Lord, I said, Lord, what do you want me to do? I mean, I'm living by myself in the hills, and I know you must have a purpose. I was a big zero. I'm running around up in the mountains without clothes on. I'm eating out of a garbage can. I was using drugs and drinking, and just I was not a very good person.
You were still doing drugs at that time?
Well, I gradually, yeah. When I was first reading the Bible, I was. Yeah, first time I studied the Bible with somebody, I was at a campfire. I didn't even have any clothes on. So I was learning slowly. Of course, they didn't either, because these were crazy days in California back then. But the Lord began to convict me and change me. And I started thinking, Lord, if you have a plan for my life, if you want me to do something, let me know. I'm willing to tell others about you. Well, right after that time, I went down to town. I called my mother from a payphone. She said, Doug, you'll never believe what happened. I was talking over lunch with a friend from NBC, and I told him, you know, my son's father is a multimillionaire, and he's living in a cave. And they thought, that's a great human interest story.
Yes, it's true.
said, would he let us come and interview him? And she said, oh, he's way back. And he said, well, we'll get a helicopter. And so right after I told the Lord, if you want me to tell anybody,
It happened.
NBC flies up to my cave with a helicopter and says, tell us, why are you doing this? And I got to share a brief testimony of why I became a Christian. And it was on national news that day. That very day they turned it around. It was amazing. And I didn't even have a TV. I had to go to a hotel lobby and ask if I could watch the news on. But God began to open doors and gradually showed me He wanted me to go into pastoring and evangelism and just to share with others what He did for me.
You know, when God first made man in the image of God. Man reflected God. Jesus is what happens when God fills a person. He said shalom. And when Jesus said shalom, all of a sudden the waves became flat, everything became very calm, and there was a great peace.